that you can say or whatever.
I will tell you that there's been some articles in the paper. That there's about 11 candidates in the state running for supervisor election that have been given that status of election deniers, or people that think they can change the voting process themselves instead of with the legislature. So yes is the answer to that.
Okay.
I would encourage everybody to go to your website. It's just amazing, all the stuff you can learn. It's just wonderful website.
Thank you, and that's one of my lines too, is that I would encourage you to go to the website, hillsborough.gov, sign up for our newsletter. We've got a little 2-page newsletter, easy read. You can email it on to friends and family, and it's got important information. Right now I'll be telling you October 7th, the last day to register to vote, how to get your vote by mail ballot. 27 early vote sites around the county. So it's a tremendous amount of information on there. And like I said, it's easy read and something you can forward right on to your friends and family.
Great, I just got one other thing, and this affects the young people. And I didn't realize that myself early. I guess young people can pre-register.
Yes.
And you have information on your website, because sometimes a lot of young people don't know how they can get started.
Yeah, we're in every high school at least twice a year. We're also on college campuses. In Florida, by law, we can pre-register 16 and 17-year-olds. They can't vote, but when they turn 18, I send their voter information card to them and they're ready to go. We also encourage them to go on our website. We've got what we call a long series of short videos. And it's everything from soup to nuts. So for somebody that's never voted before or an infrequent voter, they can go on there and say they want to vote in person. They can see, okay, I'm going to walk in, I'm going to be met by somebody, I have to show ID. They're going to check me in, I'm going to get a ballot, I'm going to vote the ballot, then I'm going to go put it in the tabulator. So it just kind of takes the mystery out of it. The same way is vote by mail. One of the videos on there is truly a behind the scenes look at our office, where we do all our own vote by mail. I've got a room about the size of the area we're in now that has these huge machines in it that we're capable, the one machine, the inserter, is capable of putting 8 items and a return envelope into an outgoing envelope. It then goes through this process where it weighs it on the fly with one 1,000th of an ounce, so it knows if there's too much or not enough paperwork in there. It gets addressed, barcodes are put on them, and then they go to the other side of the house where we have the sorter. And when we put that envelope in the sorter, it records it right then, because it's with our voter registration system, that this person is getting ready to receive a vote by mail ballot. And then we sort them to a 5-digit zip code because we get a postal discount for that. When that envelope comes back, it's fed in again to the sorter, and it reads the barcode and it goes, okay, this was in fact an envelope that we sent out to this voter, and we're also going to note in our voter registration system that your vote by mail ballot has been returned. So if you forgot you voted by mail and you go to vote early, we're going to remind you that you've already voted. And believe it or not, that happens with some of our more mature voters. Because that ballot's going out 30 days before the election, and then 2 weeks before the election, things start heating up, signs are popping up everywhere, every ad on TV, and somebody's like, oh my gosh, we need to go vote. And then they'll find out that they already did, generally. So there's some great videos on there. I would encourage you to look at them. It's very informative. We used to do tours of our office, and when COVID hit, we quit doing that, and then for security issues, obviously, we've stopped doing it too. But there's a great video on there. Other questions?
That'd be a great field trip for kids to walk in there. It really would.
We've run, we used to run a bunch of groups through there, and it's not a good practice now. So yes, ma'am.
I really admire the people who are poll workers. I know a lot of retired teachers who are, but I don't know how they do it. If they have to be there 12 hours a day for 2 weeks.
So in early voting, we run 2 shifts. So we've got an A shift and a B shift. So you're basically working every other day. You're not working 12 days straight for 12 hours. But it is, election day is a long day.
Yeah.
We're really fortunate. We've got a great group of poll workers, a lot in return. We've also reduced the median age again after COVID. That was one of the goals that we had, was to get that age down a little bit so that people at risk in polling sites. We've also, over the years, we've partnered with different organizations, the Tampa Bay Chamber, the Tampa Bay Business Partners. That's led us to a sports contact where we've got the Rays, the Bucks, the Lightning, the USF sports community, the Rowdies. And what they do every major election is, every election, there's always a national poll worker recruitment day, just as there is a national voter registration day. So on National Poll Worker Recruitment Day, all these organizations leverage their social media to all of their clients and contacts, encourage them to give their people the day off to work the polls, or at least a day off to make sure they go vote. The first time we did that, we ended up turning away 2,500 people.
Wow.
And we hired 2,500 people. So that tells you a little bit right there. 2,500 is what we have for a general election, presidential general
That's
election.
amazing.
Yes, ma'am.
I've been doing, my name is Julie Winston, I've been doing voter registration. So we have a form that we give to you guys today. The Sierra Club is an environmental organization, and we're the largest environmental organization in the country, and we've been around for about 100 years. So we get involved in one extreme. We promote the acquisition of land for conservation, and also have free hikes out to our local parks. And if you go on Meetup, and if you Google Meetup Tampa Bay Sierra Club, you can see what we have coming up. Sign up for it, and you can you don't have to be a member to come on our hikes. But anyway, we also do we do many kinds of things. We got involved in the state park issue, and we were a big force there. But also we do endorsements, candidate endorsements, at the local, state, and national level, and we look at amendments. And so today I'm here to talk about Amendment 2. If you haven't already heard about Amendment 2, which is the right to hunt and fish, this is an amendment that you say, well, yeah. At first you say, yeah, the right to hunt and fish. Well, that sounds good. And then people get a little confused. They say, wait a minute, don't we already have that right? And the answer is yes, we do. We have a Florida statute, 379.104, that gives people the right to hunt and fish in Florida. But there are some restrictions on hunting and fishing in Florida. You can only shoot black bears at certain times. Why anyone wants to shoot a black bear, I don't know, because you can't eat them. Native Americans used to, and maybe a few still do, but you can't do anything with them. It's just purely for the sake of killing. Panthers, Florida panthers, are endangered. Manatees, that's on the fishing side of this amendment, they're endangered. So there's limitations on what you can do in regard to hunting and fishing that are there for the protection of the wildlife and the marine life. Sierra Club has joined in a coalition, and what we do is we study the issue, as many of the organizations talked about, League of Women Voters, and before we take a position, and we joined with other organizations that are opposed to Amendment 2, and there's maybe about 50 of them, in the no2.org coalition. That's NOTO2.org. And it has a list of all the organizations that oppose this amendment, but also it gives a lot of documentation for the rationale, which is much broader than what I'm going to share with you today. There's vague language in this amendment. Now, as League of Women Voters said earlier today, you only have 75 words you can use. But there were some words that, let's say, protect private property rights that they took out. And maybe there's some intent behind that.
and we are very skeptical about the right to hunt and fish on private property or pursue wildlife onto private property because you have the right to hunt and fish. In many states, and what this does is this enshrines the right to hunt and fish at the highest level of our laws, the constitutional amendment. And it precludes any further restrictions on hunting and fishing and undermines those protections in laws, both at the state level and at local levels. It undermines the laws that are already there and leaves them open to challenge because people have a right to hunt and fish, and this law or that law restricts it in some way. So those laws can be challenged. And in states where the right to hunt and fish has already passed, we have seen a rollback of protections. Like, for example, in North Carolina, they are now allowed to hunt bears in a bear sanctuary. And there's various other ways that, depending on what organizations get involved and what they want to challenge, they can challenge existing laws, but then they preclude new laws. So that's why we are against Amendment 2. But also, we're talking about democracy here today. And I don't know, how many of you are familiar with the term preemption, preemptive laws? Okay. I would probably say many of you already know way more than you think you do, but I'm going to, and when I tell you about it, you will recognize it. Preemption is it's kind of a trend going through the state legislature, where they pass at a high level, at the state level, laws that prohibit certain types of regulation. And here they're using the highest law in Florida, which is the constitutional amendment. It's even higher than state laws. And so what they're saying is, if this law passes, then you can't have limits on hunting and fishing. And you certainly can't pass new limits, and they can challenge the old ones. Okay, some of this may be familiar to you. There is a ban on plastic bag bans. Sierra Club is real involved in the issue of plastics and litter in the environment and overuse of plastics in our lifestyle. Many cities and counties passed bans on plastic bags, requiring people at the grocery store to use reusable bags. There's a ban on that. Publix actually was behind it, any of you public shoppers. Tree protection. They've been undermined with preemptive legislation. Local fertilizer ordinances undermined with at the state level. So, and what these laws do is they undermine what we call home rule. And that's another term you should be familiar with because it's important. It means passing a law or passing the ability to pass regulation at the local level, which is probably closest to the problem or issue that they're trying to deal with. Not at the state level. A one-size-fits-all law at the state level may not work very well at the local level. But there's a lot of preemptive laws going on. So if you hear of a law, that maybe even one that sounds really good, a proposed law, and you start to get a little confused, you're not wrong. You just need to dig a little deeper and find out more about what the law is about. Because it might be a preemption, it might be a Trojan horse type law that sounds good at the superficial level, but when you learn more about it, it has some negatives that take away some of your rights. And that's how preemptive laws, like Amendment 2, undermine your rights. They trick voters into voting for things that sound good. In 2016, there was an amendment related to solar energy sponsored by the utilities. And I won't go into the whole context of why this was such a victory, but they told people that they had a right to solar energy. Wow, we have a right to solar energy. Well, you know, anyone who wants to put solar on the roof and can afford it can do it. So what's so new about this? But people could vote for it or against it, but it would have restricted solar at the back end after the law passed. So I just want to tell you about in the Tampa Bay Times and Florida and the Orlando Sun Sentinel have come out against Amendment 2, and there are other newspapers who are evaluating it. You're going to be hearing more from other boards. So take a stand to support our democracy and vote no on Amendment 2. And I don't know if I have time for questions. It sounds like I don't, right?
Maybe 2 questions? Anybody got a question?
I have a question. I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm against Amendment 2, but in it says it does not limit authority granted to the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. Do you know what that means?
Well, they say it doesn't, but it's not very specific. Ultimately, it could. We think it could, because they are responsible for putting regulations in place to protect our wildlife. So we think ultimately it could. Yes?
So people can't get solar anymore? There's no...
Oh, no. We voted that amendment down. We voted no. And it took away some of the barriers that would have happened to solar.
What it did was it tried to lower the cost you could charge to sell your solar back to the grid.
Yes, that's called net metering, yes.
So the way they calculated that fee was a lot lower for people. So people would not want to put solar on their house, but you couldn't get your money, make it a good investment.
Okay.
But luckily people saw what it was and they voted it
Got it. I just got a little confused.
down. Yeah. That's what it
I don't know if we have time for more questions. Okay, well, thank you so much for
And there are 2 things that I'm going to do some presentation on here. I'll probably take about 12-ish minutes. The first is a little bit on care for creation and the climate crisis, and then I want to zoom out a little bit on Lutheran social teaching and why it is that Lutherans, at least in our denomination, are so opposed to Christian nationalism. Not just because it's anti-democratic, which it is, but also because it actually undermines the witness to the gospel. So, all right. So, as I said, pastor of St. Paul Lutheran, a little bit about me. I also serve as the co-committee chair for the Care for Creation Committee for the Hillsborough Organization for Progress and Equality. I serve on the board of an organization called Lutherans Restoring Creation, which is one of our denominational social ministries that deals with just transition. And I serve on the leadership council for the food sovereignty group of the University of South Florida. It's all about helping people learn how to grow their own food, right? It used to be that people knew how to grow vegetables the same way you learn how to change a tire, but that knowledge is
we can't do either now.
Yeah, no, exactly. We can't do either now, actually. Jeez Louise. Maybe I got to start a class for helping people change tires too, you know. So. This is, there's just a couple of slides I'm going to show from this. This is a much longer presentation, which we do not have time for. Typically, I take about 45 to 50 minutes when I give this talk. I'm going to show you about 10% of it.
Do you have any of this on YouTube or anything?
I can share this. Yes, I can share the slides. I will say though, these slides are adapted from the Blessed Tomorrow program, and so you can look at them, but you cannot present them yourself without registering with them and taking their training. So that's their copyright restriction. But I can send it to you, and you can disseminate it. This is a video that some of you may have seen, but I love to show it because it graphically depicts increasing average temperatures over the course of the last century, and this is a compilation of NASA data, and it just gives a feel for what is actually happening. So this is the late 1800s, nice 10,000 years of stability, climate stability, that then begins to come to an end in the 20th century.
Ooh.
Yeah, well, we're barely getting started. This is just the 60s.
Oh.
Now into the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, 20-teens, and then notice this data is updated up to 2018. We have since then seen numerous records in wildfires, extreme heat, and so forth, and this map would look far worse today than as it stops in 2018. Here's a quick breakdown of what the primary sources are in carbon emissions that correlate with the climate crisis. And by the way, people sometimes still ask me, how do we know that this really is driven by human activity? There's a number of ways that this can be verified. But the basic point is we know about the logic of greenhouse gas processes. We know that carbon in the atmosphere is a greenhouse gas, and it can be easily correlated through just thousands and thousands of lines of study and research with our increasing average temperatures and the extreme destabilization that we're seeing.
Can you shift that projector an inch?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's do it. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, so 29% of it is from transportation, 14% globally. So in other words, we have a bigger issue with cars in the US than other countries. And by the way, the best advice I've seen is that actually plug-in hybrid electric is the best way to go. All electric obviously is better than the standard hybrids or gasoline cars. But because it's going to take a while before the full infrastructure is there for everybody to be all the way electric, or like Germany is doing, hydrogen fuel cell, which actually I think is better than all electric, but those are debates we can have another day. Plug-in hybrid electric is a great way to go, because that way you can, for daily driving, just do the electric grid, but if you need to do long distance roads, you can put gas in it still. So we also, a lot of it comes from electricity production, a lot of it from industry, and then some of it also from commercial and residential. Now, what's your individual carbon footprint if you take your slice of that little 12%? Well, that's going to come out to something like 0.0000004%, okay? So, the solution to the climate crisis is not you changing your light bulbs, okay? And actually, it's not even you running out and buying that plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, although if everybody did that, it helps, right? Major industry has to change. And that means there has to be the political will to act and vote accordingly, okay? There's no way around this. And unfortunately, I don't mean to be alarmist, but the reality is time is running short. And if a major shift doesn't happen in the next 6 years-ish, approximately, then what we're heading for is muddling into about 2.5 to 3 degrees total warming. Yes, humanity will probably survive it, probably. But it's going to be catastrophically bad. And already starting within 20 years or so, there's going to be major coastal areas that will no longer be insurable, okay? And we're already seeing problems with that now. So if you don't see that shift happen, my advice to you is consider a different state to live in 20 years from now, okay? I'm not lying. That's just where we're at. So this is a breakdown of the, so you have, I know this is hard to see, but you have in the bottom left, increasing average temperatures. The top left is CO2 in the atmosphere, and in the right is billion-dollar disasters, number of billion-dollar disasters, right? Which also correlates with the increasing warming and emissions. One of the most easily established links between major disasters and climate change is wildfires. Hurricanes are also connected with it, but it's harder sometimes to make a direct correlation. It's a lot easier with fires because you can show that dry seasons are longer, average temperatures are higher. So, okay, I'm going to make a couple more comments about recent IPCC report, and then I'm going to move on to the other part of my presentation. Every year, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change releases major synthesis reports, and if you were to read the whole thing, it would be thousands and thousands of pages long, okay? Even policymakers and experts can't digest that much information, so they have teams to come in and summarize it, okay? And basically what it does is it makes that information digestible for people who decide policy. And there are two major takeaways from the report from last year. The first one is the timeline for making deep emissions cuts is more urgent than we previously thought, approximately 10 years. That's why I said some kind of shift has to happen in the next 5 or 6 if a reasonable amount of time will be left to implement the solutions at scale. And 2, several impactful, popular, and cost-effective solutions already exist that governments and the faithful can get behind, as long as we can decide to stop fighting over this and politicizing it and recognize it's a human issue. By the way, there are Republican organizations that advocate for climate change. Yes, there's not as many of them doing it as among Democrats, but this really needs to be departisanized, depoliticized, okay? It's a human issue. Our collective survival as a species is on the line. So we need to stop politicizing this in a sense of partisanship. Okay, I'm not gonna read some of these quotes. I just want to show one quick thing here about what those solutions are. What did I do with my, oh, did I get rid of that slide? Hang on 1 second. Darn it, what happened to that second? Oh, here it is, here it is, here it is. There it is, okay. I know this print is too tiny, but this is from page 28 of the 2023 Summary for Policymakers, which breaks down the overall effectiveness of different solutions, okay? The blue that you see on this bar means that we can pull up to 2.5-ish gigatons CO2 per year equivalent out of the atmosphere implementing this solution for cheaper than what we're currently gaining our electricity from, okay? As it gets to yellow, orange, and red means you're actually investing more financially to accelerate the process, okay? That means that the most effective solutions, 2 of which are actually cheaper to implement than existing solutions, are solar and wind, up to 2.5 gigatons CO2 per year, and of course, changing agriculture and land development policies. So in other words, not bulldozing all the forests, which are like the lungs of the planet. Hello. And then I'll use.
Can you go back to that slide?
Sure.
You were saying it's cheaper to implement than.
Right. Right. So basically, what the colors represent is blue is costs are lower than the reference, which is the baseline of how we're currently drawing our energy. It's a combination of coal, natural gas, nuclear. Things like there's a variety of sources that we draw energy from. I try to stay out of the nuclear debate because I'm going to be honest with you, I sort of feel like the problem is so bad, like if nuclear has to play a role, like get with it. Mm-hmm. But I know there's a lot of people who are very nervous about that for understandable reasons, so I just kind of try to avoid the nuclear thing. But the point is, this is cheaper than natural gas and coal if it were implemented at scale. The problem is that, so like take TECO for example, they have about 10% of their grid is produced by renewables at this point. Maybe somebody from Sierra Club could update me if that's outdated. The rest of it is natural gas. Natural gas has about half the emissions of coal. That's better, okay, than a coal plant if you're in the Rust Belt or something like that. But there really is, like, to my mind, no excuse to charge an additional premium to consumers to buy into the solar program. They just need to make the transition and put everybody on it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And if there's a financial pinch in that, then the government helped get them over the edge, the same way they bailed out all the freaking banks when, like, in 2008, everybody went into foreclosure and they just left homeowners to fend for themselves and eat cake, but helped the banks out. Surely you can help TECO get over the hump and just go 100% renewable already. You know?
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just, we can't play these games anymore. We're out of time. So that's it. So it's like we do it now or we don't do it, you know? So it's like, it's the Jeremiah moment, you know? God is loving, okay? And like there is always hope on the other side. The question is, are we gonna go over a cliff or over a rocky road, okay? And there's still the rocky road option. But soon there won't be that option anymore. It's just going to be the cliff option. So, and it's heartbreaking because we've more or less known this is the case for 30 years, and it's been so politicized and so successfully suppressed. It's just like the campaigns around smoking. You know, these companies did such a good job, basically lying to the public about how dangerous smoking was, and major companies have done the same thing with climate change, and we're all paying the price for it. So. Anyway, I don't want to spend the whole time talking about the climate crisis. I easily could. I've already taken a lot of time. I just want to spend a couple more minutes just zooming out for a minute and talking about why it is my denomination is actually involved in a lot of social issues in the first place. In the Lutheran Church, we believe the heart of the gospel is the message of God's love for humanity, and it's fundamentally a message of grace, okay? And that means even though human beings make big, big mistakes, the center of gravity is to view people in terms of what we're suffering and what can help the collective situation and the common good for our fellow human beings, right? And so that is a different center of gravity from, one, the very law-focused and, let's be honest, judgmental spirituality of a lot of churches, okay? I'm not going to name names, but like I've grown up around some of them, okay? People who like told me I wasn't a real Christian because I hadn't made my decision for Jesus, you know? Even though I'm like a minister, it's like, you know, how is that not a decision? Okay, anyway, I don't want to get into all those polemics, but a grace-centered approach, and then also, therefore, a lens of compassion for our fellow human beings and not an approach of judgment. And in Lutheran theology, one of the most important distinctions for us is this distinction between law and gospel. And we also view God's kingdom in the world through the same lens. Even though the law isn't the center of gravity for us, it does still play a role. But we recognize that everything humans do in the world is going to be fundamentally flawed. And therefore, we have to take a pragmatic approach to those kinds of things, right? One principle where Lutherans historically and the authors of the U.S. Constitution have almost perfect alignment, okay? And now, mind you, remember I said in my opening comments, the authors of the Constitution were not intending this to be a Christian nation. That can be easily proven historically. They were rationalist deists, okay? Most of them didn't even believe in miracles. Thomas Jefferson ripped out half of his Bible, okay? And said, this isn't real. Just give me the, red words of Jesus kind of thing. But they did believe that human collective actions and endeavors were prone to corruption and abuse. And therefore they believed in building a secular form of governance where there were separations of powers and checks and balances to keep that stuff under wraps, okay? Or at the very least to counteract it when it occurs. To expect that that's going to occur. And to not give some kind of pride of place to a religious leader or a holier-than-thou person who claims to somehow be exempt or above those tendencies to abuse and corruption. And in fact, from our story in Reformation history, where you had huge amounts of the clergy peddling an indulgence program that was essentially an abuse of the poor and of the souls and consciences of believers, we know well in our tradition that even those who claim to be religious leaders can abuse people, right? And so along comes Christian nationalism, which looks to not the Reformation, but to the Pilgrims, right, as part of its founding myths and legends, and says, how do we build a Christian society? They're not asking the question of how do we build a relatively just, practically functional society, okay? Which, in the Lutheran view, that's what we ought to be doing. We've always been happy with government being secular for that very reason. But instead, Christian nationalism is saying, how do we make this a Christian nation with Christian Bible laws, okay? Even if that goes against the popular democratic will of the people, okay? And you might say to yourself, it's strange for a Christian minister to be saying we should follow popular democratic opinion for our laws over the Bible. But let me remind you, as Luther says in his introduction to the Old Testament, a lot of the stuff in there is not addressed to you. It's not about you. It's about ancient Israelites, and above all, about this one Jesus of Nazareth who lived in it and then went to the cross for us, okay? And so we read the Bible through a different lens. We don't ask, how am I supposed to apply this strange ancient commandment to modern life? We instead ask, what does it say about Christ? And what is his grace for you and for me? So it's just a totally different approach, and that's why for us, Christian nationalism isn't just a threat to democracy, it's a threat to the integrity of the Christian witness, because it confuses what the gospel is.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. I'm hearing some yeses, so I was like, I've landed something, right?
It turns people away from Christianity and religion in general.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
They detect the hypocrisy.
Yep. I think that's going to have to be enough. I really didn't want to go on too long, but there's so much important stuff here that I'm kind of bursting at the seams about. But thank you to those of you who came back for this additional session. How are we doing on, let me check the schedule here.
And I think our next, so that might be as far as voting, getting people to vote, a democracy issue, that might be an important one. Another one that's not in your book, but if you go online and you look for George Washington's farewell address, he talks about his fears for the future. And one of his fears is that people who are despotic will try to get as much power as possible and perhaps try to destroy the balance of the responsibilities that's in the Constitution. So just something to be thinking about, since the pastor's out right now. On behalf of St. Paul Lutheran Church, thank everybody for coming to join us, and please don't hesitate to give us some parting thoughts as you leave. And we can still use some help in taking things down starting at 2 o'clock.